Week 7 of the NFL season is in the books, and it was another great week of football. It started with the Youngfest on Thursday night between the Bengals and Steelers, with Joe Flacco's Bengals beating Aaron Rodgers' Steelers with a score of 33-31. And we are now 7 weeks into the season, and outside of the few cellar dwellers, and you know who they are, the 2025 season is as open of a year as we can remember. And for how bad the Eagles' offense looked at times in Week 6 against the Giants, they were a completely different team in Week 7, and Jalen Hurts more than answered the call. And in today's video, we're going to break down the biggest winners and losers from the 7th week of the NFL season. We're going to break down what went right, like Daniel Jones and the Colts putting up 38 points on the road, or the Chiefs' complete embarrassment of the Raiders, and we're also going to break down things that went wrong, like the Dolphins' implosion in Cleveland, and the Jags losing by 28 points in London. There was a lot to take away from Week 7, and as always, there will be a couple of more winners and losers mentioned at the end of the video as well, and without further ado, let's begin! And we are starting today's video by discussing the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts went out to SoFi Stadium and beat the Chargers 38-24 in a game where the offense put up over 400 yards and for the third consecutive week, and fourth time in the last 5 games, put up 31 or more points. And in a lot of ways, this was a highlight reel game for the Colts. Daniel Jones threw for nearly 300 yards and 2 touchdowns, Jonathan Taylor continued his Offensive Player of the Year campaign, and Tyler Warren is legitimately in the Offensive Rookie of the Year conversation. And the Colts not only put up 38 points in Week 7, but they put up 38 points on 58 plays, and aside from 1 3-and-out in the middle of the second quarter, this team scored on every possession they had leading up to the fourth quarter. And we did mention the 38 points on 58 plays, but they had 3 kneel downs at the end of the game, so really we're talking about 38 points on 55 plays on the road. And simply put, this team is clicking and they have very few weaknesses offensively because they can beat you in any way they want. If there is anything to nitpick, and this is kind of laughable because of how dominant the Colts have been, but it would be to milk the clock a bit more and not have your defense out there for 35 minutes a game like they were in Week 7. But the Colts are not only big winners because of how they played in Week 7, they also went into the game knowing the division rival Jags got smoked in London with a score of 35-7, and they also picked up a game in the AFC South race this week too. And they play the Titans in Week 8, who are a train wreck at the moment, and a team they beat 41-20 earlier in the year. And after that game, Colts receiver Michael Pittman said that they looked out of it in pregame warmups and that they felt they were going to win before the ball was even kicked off. And the Titans obviously didn't have a good Week 7 themselves, as they were beat 31-13 at home with an interim head coach in Mike McCoy, and it is not an exaggeration to say the Titans upsetting the Colts in Indy next week would be one of the biggest upsets of the entire season. And the Colts are rolling and 7-1 seems imminent. The Cowboys are also big winners from Week 7 as they improved to 3-3-1 with a 44-22 win over the Washington Commanders in a game they too put up 400 yards of offense. Dak Prescott threw for over 260 yards and 3 touchdowns, Javonte Williams ran for over 110 yards and a touchdown, and CeeDee Lamb was back too. And I know this is kind of funny to say because the Cowboys are such a discussed team nationally, but Jake Ferguson has 46 receptions and 6 touchdowns in his last 6 games, and if he were to do that over the course of a 17-game season, he would have 130 receptions and 17 touchdowns. So Jake Ferguson has also been eating recently, and the Cowboys offense is a problem. Deron Bland also had a pick 6 in this game, which was his first since Thanksgiving Day of 2023, also against Washington, and this was a very good team win for the Cowboys. And we're also at a point with Brandon Aubrey where he is such a good kicker, it's kind of an afterthought because you just expect these types of things from him. He drilled a 61-yard field goal in this game and is the first kicker in NFL history to make 5 field goals of 60-plus yards in his career. And with this win over Washington, Dallas has now put up 27 or more points in each of their last 4 games and have 400 yards or more in 3 of those 4 games. And the Cowboys defense obviously leaves a lot to be desired for, though credit where it's due for holding Washington to 22 points in this game, but if this offense is clicking, Dallas can beat anyone on any given Sunday. Dak Prescott is playing at a high level, and I do think it's a shame this team is only 3-3-1, as they've played really well offensively under Brian Schottenheimer, but to make a joke about the Cowboys and act like they're not an elite offense simply isn't true. They play in Denver next week, and I can't wait to see how this team fares. But they're undoubtedly one of the biggest winners from Week 7. And with NFL teams within the NFL draft, we often talk about them selecting a player at a position of need a year ahead and how they're planning for their future. And it's never a bad idea to plan for your future either, and that's where today's sponsor comes into play, Ethos. And with life insurance from Ethos, your family is protected. Now, I myself do not have kids, but I have family and friends who do have kids, and we've talked about the responsibility that comes with financially providing for their young family, and how life insurance makes it easy to protect their family's future. Now, the traditional life insurance process can be complicated, but Ethos is an online platform that makes getting life insurance to protect your family's future a fast and easy process in a matter of minutes, not months. There is no medical exam required, you just have to answer a few health questions online. Ethos also has 4.8 out of 5 stars on Trustpilot with over 2,400 reviews, and you can get a policy for as low as $2 a day, which is billed monthly, and you can get a quote in as little as 10 minutes, and ultimately you can protect your family's future with life insurance from Ethos. And you can get your free quote at ethos.com/GFB. That's ethos.com/GFB. And a big thank you to Ethos for sponsoring today's video. The Cincinnati Bengals are in today's video for a couple of reasons, and the first is, of course, that they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. And why this is big, of course, is because the Steelers are currently first in the AFC North, and like we've mentioned a couple of times on the channel now, given that the Bengals are 3-4 through 7 games, there is a big difference from a fan standpoint in buying in with your team, being 3-4 through 7 games and 2-5 through 7 games. And likewise, I also think that there's a big difference between being 6-3 through 9 games and 5-4 through 9 games. But why the Bengals are in today's video is because this was a huge win for this team, because if they were 2-5, you would really have to do a lot of mentally talking yourself back into the season. But now that they are 3-4, they play the Jets and Bears in the next 2 games before their Week 10 bye, and pretty quickly with how the Bengals looked in the second half against the Packers in Week 6, and of course with how they looked through the entire game in Week 7 against the Steelers, in a game they put up 33 points and 470 yards of offense, you can pretty quickly talk yourself into the fact that the Bengals could be 5-4 heading into their Week 10 bye. Now, just because we did mention there is a possibility that the Bengals could be 5-4 heading into their Week 10 bye, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves and basically say that the 25 Bengals are going to be the version of the 24 Eagles this year, and that from a certain point on, they're not going to lose when Joe Burrow starts and completes a full game, and that they're destined to go all the way. But it is something to look forward to for Bengals fans, and one other thing that I did want to point out that the Bengals did a really good job of in Week 7 was, as simple as it is, give their best player the football. They gave Jamar Chase a 4-year, $161 million contract for a reason, and Jamar Chase is the 3rd Triple Crown winner since 2005, which was Steve Smith in 2005, Cooper Kupp in 2021, and Jamar Chase, of course, last year. And 99% of the time, maybe even 100% of the time, whenever he steps on the field, he is going to be the best player on the field. So as simple as it is, get him the football. Guys don't need to get paid $35 or $37 or $40 million to finish the year with 85 or 90 receptions. Whenever you are paying a player that much money, if you are paying a guy $40 million per year for 80 receptions, that in theory would be $500,000 per catch for the season. So get the guys the football 110, 120, maybe even 130 times per year, and let your playmakers cook. So I know it was a short week for Zach Taylor from a game planning standpoint, and this was also a career high for a Joe Flacco receiver in a single game to have 16 receptions, as a graphic popped up midway through the game that the previous high was Steve Smith with 13 receptions back in 2015. But as simple as it is, the Bengals could be onto something that the rest of the NFL should really tail, if I'm being honest. Get your best playmakers the football, and if you have a Puka Nacua or a Justin Jefferson or an A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith, and credit Kevin Patullo, Jalen Hurts, and the Birds for getting Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown the football in Week 7, it's very simple. They are the best or amongst the best playmakers on the field. Get the rock in their hands and let them go to work. And a big credit to Zach Taylor for this, for having Joe Flacco continuously get Jamar Chase the football in a game where they desperately needed to get their season back on track. Now, the Jacksonville Jaguars are up, and unfortunately this team is in today's video for several reasons. They lost in Week 7 to the Rams with a score of 35-7, and really since the start of the 2023 season, it seems like for every step this team takes forward, they almost always take 1, if not 2 steps back, and that's kind of been the summarization of the Trevor Lawrence era, really since the start of year 3 when expectations for him and the team were increased. Now, this team did not lose 35-7 strictly because of Trevor Lawrence, and one thing that I do do want to get out of the way, is the offensive line in this game from a pass protection standpoint was awful. They had 2 players allow 7 or more pressures, and whenever you have not just 1 but 2 turnstiles along the offensive line all day, you are going to be in for a long day. And honestly, it seemed like a tale of 2 halves for the Jags offense. Within the first half, I thought Trevor Lawrence missed several throws or was late on several throws, and there was a play with 4.5 minutes left in the second quarter where if Trevor Lawrence throws this on time and in rhythm, there's a big completion. Now, they were down 21-0 at this point, so even if he completes this pass for 30 yards to Parker Washington, does it really make a difference in the grand scheme of things? Probably not, if we're being completely honest, but the second half was kind of the opposite, where I thought Trevor Lawrence was a lot more in sync and in rhythm, and the receivers and the offensive line, of course, let him down big time. Now, one of my biggest frustrations with the Jags over the past couple of years is really whenever you start to believe in this team and really start to think to yourself that, hey, this team can make a run. Maybe not go to the Super Bowl, but maybe win a playoff game, maybe 2, because this conference is absolutely loaded from a quarterback standpoint, but maybe they can meet probably the Chiefs is who we'd probably be referring to here. In the AFC Championship game, this team can do it, and it's almost on cue that right at that point, as soon as you start to believe, the rug pulls out and the Jags unfortunately choke. It doesn't have to be in the postseason, but come up short in the regular season for that matter too. And this team forced 14 turnovers in the first 5 games of the 2025 season, 14 in the first 4. So credit where it's due for Anthony Campanelli's defensive unit, as they were playing on another level to start the season, at least from a turnover standpoint. And in the first 4 games alone of the 2025 season, the Jags defense forced more turnovers than the entire 2024 Jags team did. So again, credit where it's due. And they of course had the timely Devin Lloyd 99-yard pick 6 against the Chiefs, which in a lot of ways, given they won that game by a field goal and the Chiefs were about to score a touchdown, that in a lot of ways determined the outcome of the game. But in the last 2 weeks against Sam Darnold's Seahawks and Matt Stafford's Rams, they've allowed 55 points and have scored just 19. And not surprisingly, they have also forced 0 turnovers. Now, as the Jags enter their Week 8 bye with a 4-3 record, it's not all doom and gloom, as off their bye, they play the Raiders, Texans, Chargers, Cardinals, and Titans, and I don't think they're going to be 9-3 through 12 games, but they could easily be 7-5 or 8-4, but what really frustrates me with this team, and especially over the last 2 weeks, is almost on cue. It's like a genie rug pull that whenever you really buy in with the Jags, that they always have something come up, whether it's a 20-plus pressure game allowed by the offensive line, or Trevor Lawrence having a bad first half and a good second half, and even when he has a good second half, the receivers drop not 1 but almost half a dozen passes within the same game, or that your defense allows 5 passing touchdowns to Matt Stafford. And what's also frustrating is this is a game against a good team that you really wanted to compete in to show that you belong in the conversation with the big dogs. I really hope the Jags can turn it around, but losing by 28 points in a game against the Rams, in which, by the way, you spent all week over there in London preparing for this game while the Rams flew in on Saturday, ultimately is a big reason as to why the Jags are in today's video, and of course the fact that they lost by 28 points. Next up is the Philadelphia Eagles, and more specifically Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, and A.J. Brown for the performances they had in Week 7 against the Minnesota Vikings. Heading into Week 7, the Eagles were in a tough spot, and if they lost this game, especially to the Carson Wentz-led Vikings, nobody would have been fired, but there would have been a lot of noise in the city of Philadelphia, because that would have been 3 straight losses to the Broncos, Giants, and Vikings. And with how the offense looked in the Giants game in Week 6, combined with the Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterboo show, it was a long 10 days heading into this game. And Jalen Hurts had one of the best games of his career in Week 7, as he threw for 326 yards and 3 touchdowns and also had a perfect passer rating. Whatever the Vikings threw at him, he had an answer, and for as erratic as he looked at times in Week 6 against the Giants, that was nowhere to be seen in Week 7. And against Minnesota, he looked calm, poised, and like the Jalen Hurts Birds fans have come to love over the past few years. And seemingly every time the Vikings had a chance to get off the field, especially in the second half, Jalen Hurts and the Eagles converted. Whether it was the 3rd and 13 with 9 minutes left in the game to extend the drive, and a drive the Eagles would eventually score to make it a 2-possession game, or whether it was the 3rd and 9 with 1:45 left to play to A.J. Brown for 45 yards, the Eagles had a day. Devontae Smith had a career-high 183 receiving yards, which was highlighted by a 79-yard touchdown in the third quarter, and I know this is a crazy concept, but who would have thought good things happen when you get your good receivers the football? The Eagles are now 5-2, and they have a revenge game against the Giants next week at the Link, and something tells me they're going to be ready for it to try to improve to 6-2 before their Week 9 bye. There's obviously been a lot of noise around the Birds in the first 7 weeks of the season, a lot of it bad, but they played well in this game, and Jalen Carter also had a day and absolutely drilled Carson Wentz on a pick 6 for the Birds in the first half. The Vikings' game plan was to stop Saquon Barkley and force Jalen Hurts to beat them, and Jalen Hurts more than delivered when it mattered. The Denver Broncos are also in today's video, and for 3 quarters, it looked like they were going to be in today's video for all the wrong reasons. And I know checking in on fan bases during games isn't exactly a great measurement for rational thoughts or decisions, but there were a lot of Broncos fans at the time that wanted Sean Payton to give up play calling and that this team was always going to be limited because of the poor decisions Sean Payton makes. And also within this, they wanted Davis Webb, who is viewed as an upcoming great offensive mind, to call plays and see where the offense goes. And when Theo Johnson scored the touchdown for the Giants, especially the way that it happened, that was the summarization of the day for Denver to that point. They were down 26-8 with 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and it was ugly. But they never stopped fighting, and on the day the late Demaryius Thomas was inducted into the Broncos Ring of Fame, who tragically passed away at 33 years old, the Broncos scored 33 fourth quarter points to beat the Giants in an improbable come-from-behind victory. And this was a huge win for Denver because the Chiefs are right in their tails for the lead in the AFC West, and especially in this division with how good the Chiefs have looked over the past few weeks, I don't think you can say, oh, it's just one game. Every game means that much more, and given how Denver looked offensively in Week 6 against the Jets, there was a point where they had just 13 points in their last 7 quarters, but they more than made up for it, and because of that, they are big winners from Week 7. The Kansas City Chiefs are up, and I know some people get Chiefs fatigue, but guys, this is one of the best teams in the NFL year in and year out, and there were questions earlier in the year about whether or not the Chiefs would be able to recover and whether Travis Kelce was over the hill and how much this team was going to be able to really accomplish this year, but despite everything, they're 4-3 and everything is trending in the right direction. And even after they defeated the Lions 30-17 in Week 6, I tweeted out the question of whether or not it was fair to power rank a then 3-3 team number 1 because of how everything looked to be going for the Chiefs. They were getting receiver Rashee Rice back, and they were also playing a bad division team, and it was going to be pretty shocking if they lost that game to the Raiders, and they didn't, as they won 31-0, and they had 30 first downs to the Raiders' 30 total plays. I mean, this was as much of a belt-to-ass game as you're ever going to find in the NFL, and I do think that that term is significantly overused, as I think people will use that term whenever they beat their rival maybe 24-20 in a game where they had a game-winning touchdown with less than a minute to play and say, man, it was really belt to ass. But guys, the Chiefs had over 400 yards of offense to the Raiders 95. The Raiders had 3 first downs in a 60-minute game, to give you an idea of how much of a belt to ass game this was for the Kansas City Chiefs. And whenever you can beat a rival like this and really humiliate them in the process, this is undoubtedly a team that's one of the biggest winners from Week 7. Now, in theory, the Raiders are also one of the biggest losers from Week 7 because getting beat by 31 points on the road and being Andy Reid's first team that is shut out in over 400 career games coaching in a game where you didn't show up at all, well, it's going to make you one of the biggest losers already. But Daniel Jeremiah of the NFL Network said that he watched every play from the Raiders offense, which again was 30 total plays, and he just watched it one time through, and it took him 4 minutes and 44 seconds to give you an idea of just how putrid of a game this was for the Raiders. This was not just a standard, okay, the team lost by a couple of touchdowns, whatever. This was an all-time ass beating, and the Raiders are one of the biggest losers from Week 7 and ultimately the 2025 season, and we will do a lot more Raiders content coming up, as I don't want to spoil every video that we have coming up, but there will be a lot more Raiders-focused content in the coming weeks, and we'll discuss what they can do to get out of the situation and ultimately some of the decisions they made to get in the situation they're currently in. The Miami Dolphins are up, and all I have to say, guys, it's over. This team has been building towards the 2025 season for a couple of years now, and this was supposed to be a year where, yes, they had a little bit of a down 2024 season, but they went out and addressed the trenches this offseason by selecting Kenneth Grant in the first round and Jonas Avenaya in the second round, and also brought in James Daniels in free agency, and this was supposed to be a year where the Dolphins, yes, they acknowledged that they had a step back, but they were going to be a 10-win team and get to the postseason, and they just got beat 31-6 by the Browns in week 7 in a game where Tua threw 3 interceptions. And I really think the cherry on top for the past couple of years for the Dolphins, and honestly since the 70-point game against the Broncos, as it's been largely downhill since then, was the fact that they were showing an in-game highlight on CBS about Tua throwing an interception, and while the in-game highlight was being shown on another broadcast, Tua threw another interception while that highlight of the previous interception was being thrown.
This right here is Tua Tagovailoa's second pick of the game. And literally as we speak, Tua threw another pick.
On a couple of the interceptions against the Browns in week 7, I have absolutely no idea what Tua was seeing to begin with, and Mike McDaniel was asked in a press conference on Monday about whether or not Tua was going to be the long-term guy, and he said yes, that he was, and the expectation is to not throw 10 picks. And when you look at this situation from Mike McDaniel's perspective, you have 3 options at quarterback with your job effectively on the line. You have Hawaiian Tim Boyle, you have Mormon Mahomes, and you have a 7th-round pick in Quinn Ewers, who I thought was not a good player at the University of Texas, and a player who I don't believe is going to go from a not great college quarterback to a good NFL quarterback. So when you talk about biggest losers from the 7th week of the NFL season, unfortunately, the Miami Dolphins, maybe the Raiders because of how bad they got beat by the Chiefs, but with the Dolphins situation leading up to where they are now and with a couple of year build-up to get beat by 25 points by a team that had not scored more than 17 points in a game in nearly a full calendar year, unfortunately, the Dolphins take the cake for the biggest loser of the 7th week of the NFL season. Now, there were a lot of winners and losers from week 7 of the NFL season, so there are a couple of more on the screen right now. Please comment below who you think was the biggest winner or loser from the 7th week of the NFL season, but that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel as we are closing in on 220,000 subscribers, and I cannot thank you guys enough for the support. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.